Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Royal Blue podcast. I'm Ian Croll, joined by the Echo's Everton FC correspondent, Joe Thomas. Joe, how are things? All good?
Yeah, not too bad. Cheers, thanks, Ian.
Watched the England game last night?
Yeah, I did.
Impressed or just...
Best performance of the tournament so far.
Yeah.
So going to be a really interesting final, I think, isn't it? I thought they deserved to win last night.
Yeah.
Great to see Jordan Pickford in a final as well. So didn't think he could really do anything about the goal. Looks bad in slow motion, but he hit it with such ferocity, didn't he? That's it.
Yeah, I don't want to dwell too much in England because we are obviously an Everton podcast.
Of course.
But, it's just nice to see an Everton goalkeeper in a European final, and fair play to Jordan. He's a tremendous goalkeeper.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Right then, let's get some plugs and promos out the way before we do get going, because we've got plenty to get through in such a short space of time. The plugs and promo. We've got a new episode of the Goodison Park My Home series featuring Leon Osman, which is premiering tonight at 7 p.m. on the Royal Blue YouTube channel. The audio version is already out on the podcast platforms, so if you prefer, you can listen to that right now. But if you want to watch it instead, that you can watch that at 7 p.m. tonight on the Royal Blue YouTube channel. We've also got another interview in the bag with former Everton player and former assistant manager Alan Irvine. He was in the Royal Blue studio yesterday with a great interview with Chris Beasley, so keep an eye out for that one in the coming weeks. Joe, have you enjoyed that series so far? Have you watched a couple of them? Obviously, some former players, some former greats.
Yeah, I think it's been absolutely fantastic. I think it's a real tribute to what you and Chris have been doing. We all know it's such a poignant year, such a massive year ahead last year at Goodison Park, and the excitement of moving to the new stadium and the work that's still going on there. It just cleared the pitch of all the vehicles now. It's starting to kind of build up the layers and ahead of planting the seeds and that. So I think the kind of last recognisable thing that's missing from the new stadium is going to start developing over the coming months, which would be pretty cool. But the series has been brilliant. I mean, the vast array of personalities they've got on, from some of Everton's great teams of old to more modern players like Leon Osman now. I mean, and the insight that he gives is quite particularly fascinating because he sees it from two different angles. Now, obviously, he had a wonderful playing career with Everton, and then now we see him spend more time in the media suite. He's one of us rather than one of them. He's seen it as a pundit and a commentator now. So I mean, I'm sure his insight is it's particularly fascinating because he has seen it from both worlds.
Okay, one final bit of promo, and probably the most important bit, and we'll probably mention this a couple of times throughout the podcast, but Joe, you are off to Ireland next week to follow Sean Dyche and the club on a little mini pre-season tour. We've got, plenty plans, podcasts, on-location podcasts, videos, but off to Ireland, looking forward to that.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Obviously, they've got a game against Sligo on the Friday, but I'll be out there for a few days before then. I'll be going out on Tuesday morning. The players go out on Monday, and I'll be coming back on the Saturday as well. So, hoping to get to spend a bit of time in and around the camp, maybe speak to a few of the staff and the players, and see what's going on, and hopefully speak to plenty of supporters out there as well. And going to be a really interesting one, I think, because normally, these pre-season camps, there's always a bit of. It's easy to be positive in pre-season because you've got no idea what's going to come. But it does feel like at the moment that there's probably a little bit more positivity around Everton than there has been for quite some time. So hopefully that's filtering through to the players as well and just giving them a little bit of an extra spring in their step. I think it'll be a really interesting one. So, nowhere near as far away as some of the Premier League rivals, but I think it'll be interesting. And of course, one thing there'll be a lot of focus around Seamus Coleman. As we go back to Sligo, which is where he came through the ranks before Everton picked him up, and I think he's become a huge amount of pride there, and there's a huge amount of media interest as well. I think that probably going to be spending a lot of time trying to fight my way through a gaggle of Irish journalists who are all trying to get there for Seamus for obvious reasons. So hopefully I'll get in there too.
Proper football nearly back soon, even if it is just pre-season. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I am looking forward to it. I think I'm looking at, it's easy to kind of roll your eyes a little bit sometimes when you see the pre-season schedule. I know it's not as exciting and as illustrious as some of the other Premier League clubs and even what Everton have done. I'm fortunate enough in the short time that I've been doing this job to have gone to America and to have gone to Australia with the club. Obviously, last year it was the resort off Lake Geneva, and this time it's even closer home with Ireland. But I'm really looking forward to going to Ireland, seeing Dublin. Never been to Dublin. and travelling across to the west of the country for the Sligo game. I think that'll be lovely from a just personal scenery perspective. I mean, such a gorgeous country. Really excited for that, and I'm actually weirdly excited for some of the home friendlies as well. I think that Coventry and Salford, I haven't been to either of those grounds. I've been to a lot of the lower league football grounds, but I haven't been to either of those. And Preston's not too far from home either. And Ryan Lowe is the manager there, who, some of the listeners may have read it, others may not. If I'd urge you to check it out. Did a big chat with Ryan Lowe halfway through last season. Ryan Lowe's a lad from just off Scotty Road. He's a big Liverpool fan. I think most people probably know that. But he had a really remarkable Football League career upon which he's building a managerial career that is taking him closer and closer to the Premier League. And what's really fascinating about Ryan is the fact that whilst he's a big red, he happily accepts and acknowledges this, he owes a lot of the career that he's had in football down to Everton. Believe it or not, it was Everton that essentially paved the way for him to move from the amateur leagues in Liverpool, where he was a very good player but within a very, very talented arena, into professional football with recommendations from Everton, who were tracking him as he developed through the system around Liverpool, through the local leagues. And it was ultimately they couldn't do a deal for him because of the age that he kind of came good, essentially, and kind of fell into that trap where he was a bit too old to be a youth player but probably not quite good enough to be a first team player, but instead they ended up recommending him to Shrewsbury Town, which is where Kevin Ratcliffe was manager at the time. Okay. He gave him his big professional break, and from there the rest is history. So I'm looking forward to seeing Ryan up around there as well. So I think that's a nice story that a lot of people who listen to this might not necessarily know. And as I say, whilst he is a big red, like, he will happily sit there and tell you how important Everton have been to his career. So,
yeah, interesting. Well, we are live on YouTube. It is obviously late afternoon. Usually we would go a little bit earlier, but we thought we'd bring you a bit of a bonus show for Thursday afternoon. Please get your thoughts in, get your opinions in, questions. As always, we love the interaction. It's always appreciated. Let us know what you think about Jordan. Get your thoughts on that, even if you don't care about England. Even if you just want to let us know what you're doing this afternoon. The comments and interaction, again.
And also, just to jump in there, really, obviously we know about all the interaction and engagement that we get online. That's obviously the place where I'm most accessible, but getting quite a lot of people, particularly listeners to the Royal Blue podcast, who keep coming up to me. Normally people don't recognise my face.
Now?
Not quite famous, but I think my voice is quite unique. Okay. I hate it whenever I listen back to all these things. I feel sorry for you, the listeners, because you must hate the sound of my voice. But I think it's this kind of weird Shropshire, grown up in Shropshire, but now at a point where very shortly I'll have lived more of my life on Merseyside and Liverpool than anywhere else. It's kind of come this weird little, I don't know. So
honorary Scouser.
Oh no, I wouldn't go anywhere near that far or anything like that. But I think people do recognise my voice, and that's it. I was we were talking about the semi-final. I was watching the quarter-final of the Euros at the weekend in the city centre after finishing one of my shifts, and ended up we were in one of the restaurants on Castle Street, and a fan called Mark came up and spoke to me. I was really grateful. I had a nice chat with him. I think we were both a few beers deep, to be fair. But I really do I really do appreciate the interaction, and that includes criticism as well. Please, this is an open forum. We're trying our best, but I think we're both people that started our journalism careers in a print industry before it became a lot more do things like this. So we're still learning, aren't we? So we're always grateful for people telling us what they think.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, we got some questions in straight away, or not really. Well, a question and an opinion. So Rob Fulton said, "Afternoon, lads, from sunny East Belfast. Gutted Everton aren't playing a game here." Yeah. Glentoran. Glentoran, sorry, that is obviously Rob's team. And the half-eaten sandwich says, "Do you risk?" Well, I'll tell you what, we'll come on to this one because it's about Dominic Calvert-Lewin.
Slightly worried that the half-eaten sandwich is Chris Beasley, given some of the comments that we've had with him over recent weeks at his dinners.
Well, Chris is not in today, so we don't know what he's had for his lunch on the sandwiches. So you'll have to tweet him, which is at Chris Beasley. I don't know what his Twitter handle is.
It's at C Beasley Echo.
C Beasley Echo, so that's where you can find him. Okay, well, Branthwaite, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Philogene and Dele Alli is kind of the agenda today. Joe, you wanted to start with Jaden Philogene. I'm not going to go into Chris Beasley's joke of what he did last time, but if you want to hear that back, then you can listen to Monday's podcast. So it seems like it's turning into not just a transfer saga, but a bit of a circus.
Yeah, I think, circus, it does feel like it's become a bit like that. I think the reality is it's been a lot more straightforward than it's perhaps looked, as different people have written different things. I think if you look back to what I wrote on Tuesday morning, which was Everton had entered formal talks with Hull and were hopeful of doing a deal with him, but the Ipswich were favourites at the time. I think that's probably stood the test of time pretty well, although Villa have since emerged because of the rights that they had as part of the contract from when they sold him to Ipswich. But it has become a little bit of an interesting one from a player that I don't think many people had really heard a lot of. He had a very good season with Hull last season in the Championship. They narrowly missed out on the playoffs. He scored 12, set up 6. I think a lot of people that kind of pay at least a passing bit of attention to Championship would have seen his goal against Rotherham, which he scored with a Rabona. Like, it really was a standout moment of last season. So I think people have recognised that. But it really has kind of, a lot of noise has come out of nowhere. Obviously, Ipswich are looking to move early. They've done a lot of interest in business, actually, and probably the interest in business that affects Everton is one of the players that they have almost got over the line from Hull City is Jaden's teammate, Jacob Greaves, who's a centre-back, 23-year-old Championship Team of the Year last year. Player that one of the centre-backs that's been on Everton's radar for a little bit of a time. I think probably more than anything, just as the club are looking around, a bit like Jacob Bryan at Lyon, where they're kind of just contingency plans depending on what happens with Branthwaite, that type of thing. Well, it looks like that option won't be there if it was needed, because he's on the verge of signing for Ipswich, and as part of those talks, the Philogene move has kind of progressed with them as well. Ipswich went in for a double deal. Now, Everton, like I reported a couple of weeks ago, they are interested. I think a winger, it's fair to say, is one of the key priorities now. They've obviously brought Jack Harrison in, but still wide players, especially with Dobbin having been sold to Aston Villa and Danjuma going back to his parent club Villarreal. Everton still only really have two natural wide attacking players. You could play James Garner on the right midfield, but I think that's a stopgap that we'd all probably rather avoid if we can.
Well, we haven't gained anything really with Harrison because he was there last season.
Yeah, I can understand what you're saying.
That he signed, I'm all for it.
If anything, Everton are down 2 players on where they were last, because they haven't got Dobbin and they haven't got Danjuma, even though they didn't play very much at all. So a winger is definitely a priority. We saw that a little bit with Yankuba Minter, the interest there, although that was kind of very much contingent on talks over Dominic Calvert-Lewin with Newcastle. Then Jaden Philogene emerged, a player that I think suits Everton in a lot of ways. He very much fits the profile that Kevin Fowler would ideally like to be signing for Everton, that young up-and-coming player that you can get for a relatively reasonable fee, but has a high ceiling you hope can develop with the club. And also being someone who, like I say, that fee isn't extortionate with him. I think, in fairness to the Hull City chairman, he's always been quite open. He said this about Greaves as well, with if players want to make that step up to the Premier League, he's not going to step in their way. As long as a reasonable fee comes in through the door, he's open to the talks. Yeah. Seems quite progressive on that front. So he's been there. The interest is there, and it's a realistic proposal, and Everton are definitely interested in it. And Everton have entered formal talks and bid and things like that. And I think probably far more of us than we'd like to have pressed follow on his representative's Instagram page over recent days, and he's not been shy on saying where he is, and people can see the pictures from Finch Farm. And in fairness, I know there's a lot of talk about him at Barcelona and the antics that went on there last week. Well, Finch Farm is a place which is it's a gated premises from the outside, so you're not getting those photos by wandering in and then getting turned away at the front door. So
I did think Photoshop at the time.
I
know he was at Barcelona, wasn't he?
Maybe, but Everton have definitely had talks there, and they were in a position earlier on this week where they thought a deal was possible. I'm not sure if they ever became truly confident that a deal would happen, because I think they were always aware that there were lots of other clubs that were interested, and Ipswich had a bit of a head start. But everyone were in a position where they were hopeful a deal could take place. They didn't think that personal terms, that would be an issue. But kind of, I think, became a little bit clearer as the day went on that Ipswich probably perhaps willing to go a little bit further than Everton and probably progressed their deal a little bit further as well. And now the situation is, since then, Ipswich probably leading the line still. In that piece I wrote on Tuesday morning, I wrote that because we had the Hull City chairman on record saying that Ipswich are favourites. Now, of course, he is part of this very complex web of intrigue and lots of different people, all with lots of different interests, all trying to push their own narratives. But when you got someone on record saying things like that, considering all the stuff that gets said off the record, you tend to have to take that a little bit more seriously. And it looks like Ipswich remain the favourites. But Aston Villa emerged on Wednesday. They matched Ipswich deal, so it's kind of what happens next. Aston Villa sold Philogene to Ipswich 12 months ago, and as part of that contract, they agreed a clause whereby if Hull accepted a bid from anyone, Aston Villa would have the opportunity to match it and see where it goes. So, but probably the most interesting development is that Hull have gone off to Turkey for their pre-season camp this week, and Philogene initially stayed in England because they're anticipating a deal getting done. Well, he didn't fly out with the main group from Humberside Airport, but he has now joined that group. So what that says about the whole situation, I'm not entirely sure, because it does feel like there's a deal to be done there for someone. But Hull are also saying that they'll happily hang on to the player if it becomes too much of a circus and it's they don't end up with a deal that they're happy with. So I don't think you could quite rule Everton out yet, because I think there's still a little bit of mileage left in this one. But like I'm hoping we made clear from the beginning of the week, and I think that there's an acceptance at Everton. Everton have to play catch up here. This is a Ipswich, Aston Villa. Ipswich have been leading it for a while. Aston Villa have been in a situation where no matter how late they choose to come in, if they choose to come in, they have a seat at the table. That's where they are right now as well. Yeah. Everton are behind that. So I think, if anything, I think Everton are probably moving on to having a look at other wingers as well now, just because that would make sense.
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly got talent. I don't think there's anyone's disputing that. I just think, for me, it's one of those where if we get him, it's kind of like, great, we've got a fantastic young player with so much potential. Who knows what he could do? Potential sell-on value as well. Obviously, I'm sure the club are looking at that, but it's also a lot of red flags for me surrounding him. And if we don't get him, it's kind of like, oh well, we've kind of not dodged the bullet, because I don't know too much about him, but he just seems to be carrying a lot of baggage, certainly with his agent, and I don't know whether that's a good thing.
I think sometimes it's perhaps a little bit unfair to label that a player, because there's a lot that goes on that isn't, ultimately he's just a footballer and he's playing that.
Isn't he? I get that.
And different agents and different representatives go around, and different football clubs go around their business in different ways, and it's not always reflective of a player. And he hasn't come out and said so much about what he wants. We know he wants to move to the Premier League, but it's one of those ones where a lot is often said on his behalf rather than from him in general. I think that he'll be a good signing for anybody that whoever gets him. I think he'd be a very good signing for Everton. But yeah, that noise, whether it's from him, it probably isn't from him necessarily, but obviously his representatives will still be representing to him wherever he moves. So you kind of do worry that the minute if he was to join, the minute he was to get five consecutive starts and has a little run of form of goals and that, you're then going to just be hearing left, right and centre, people coming in for him next because of that noise is always around there. So I think that I do think Everton do genuinely need to strengthen out wide. I think the lack of options means you can't say that it's a bonus if they get another winger through the door. I think they have to get more wide options through the door. Yeah. But I think we're early enough in the transfer window, and I think there's been a positive enough start with what we've seen so far for us to kind of go, you know what, if there's a little bit too much baggage here, or if other clubs are pushing the price up a little bit more to what we're comfortable paying, move it, go on to the next one, just dust our hands off, go again, go again, and just take it with all of a pinch of salt. Except that's the nature of the transfer market, and particularly Everton at the moment. Whilst things are improving, they're not a club that have got the money to go and blow competitors out the water. They can't, offer 16, see Ipswich offer 18, and then go, screw it, we're going to offer 24. That's just not where Everton are at this present stage. So there'll probably be a bit more of this over the course of the transfer window, where you see Everton joining a fight that they might not be able to win because it gathers momentum and more bids as it goes on. But I think probably what the promising thing that we're seeing so far is the type of players that Everton are going for and the type of price range. I think we can see a strategy that makes a bit of sense. Hopefully that will continue.
Okay, well, we've already mentioned the half-eaten sandwich. We've got a question from the half-eaten sandwich YouTube channel. It's about Dominic Calvert-Lewin, which, he's on our agenda this week. He has been in the news, reports that he's rejected the contract offer from Everton, that he's also been on the radar of Manchester United. The half-eaten sandwich asks, do you realistically think that there's a chance Dominic Calvert-Lewin will stay?
I think there is a chance that he stays. I think that we spoke about this on Monday's podcast. I think of all the situations, incoming and outgoings, I think his is the most important to resolve as quickly as possible. And it's looking quite difficult to resolve that at the moment. I think at the moment, we know that New Deal has been offered and we know that he hasn't signed it. I don't know if he's going to outright reject it. I don't think we've got to that stage yet, because I think that at this relatively early stage of the transfer window, there's still a lot of movement, there's still a lot of different parties that are all kind of not quite, putting their hand in it. If you get to the end of, or a month, if you get to the end of the summer or close to the end of the summer, and no one's seriously come in for him, I'm sure at that point his mind might start to turn a little bit and go, well, what's better for me here? And similarly, the club are going to be making that same thought process as well. If he's not signing a new contract, do you cut your ties and try and sell him now while you can make some money? Everton could do with sales, so the money would be helpful. Obviously, he's a free next year. If you're going to be without him, as difficult as he would be to replace, ideally you want to be able to have as long as possible to prepare for his departure and find alternatives, whether they're in the squad or externally. So it's going to be but selling him for a price depends on two things. Depends on a club not only coming in for him, but then being willing to pay, something close to whatever and consider acceptable. So it's hugely up in the air. I don't think you can rule out him staying. I think it's probably less likely that he does at the moment. I think it's clear that. And this is probably clear from the Newcastle talks that happened just before the end of June. I think it's probably clear that if a club was willing to pay enough money, if a club was willing to pay enough money and to produce a package that was attractive enough to him, there's probably a scenario where everybody can win.
What is that though? What's the realistic transfer value on the Calvert-Lewin right now?
It's difficult to say, isn't it? It depends on what you're judging him. Are you judging him on, last season, when he played most of his games, had the best form, best fitness he's had for a long time? In which case, you go and say, well, a fully fit Dominic Calvert-Lewin is a player who is hugely valuable in the Premier League. But then you say, he didn't score that many goals, but then he like Everton had that horrible 4 or 5 month spell where they just couldn't get over the line, did they? Do you do it on the end of the season where he had the form that ultimately kept Everton in the Premier League? Showed real courage to step up at that, scored that late penalty at Newcastle to get that really important draw, and then obviously had the gols. The big goal against Burnley, bit of luck, he deserved it. Then the massive goal against Liverpool, that I think will live long in all our memories. So it's. I think his value will change as the window goes on, because I think that the longer it goes without something being resolved, obviously, the more Everton might be willing to drop it if they think that he's not going to sign new terms. So I just Everton probably with his fitness record, what I think is fair to say is that if he was to move, he'll end up going for less than what a fully fit proven Dominic Calvert-Lewin should really go for, because there's a lot of question marks still over his fitness. He addressed them to a certain extent last season, but he still had 2 years before that where he was, really, really blighted with injuries, and that lives that will still live in the memory. And also, the fact that he's only got 12 months left on his deal. So whatever his true market value is, Everton will end up having to sell for less than that because of the baggage at both ends of that. So the question is probably less what is his value and more where's the cut-off point for Everton? At what point, what's the lowest amount of money that they're willing to accept for him, rather than just go, we're better off keeping this proven Premier League goal scorer that we're probably going to struggle to replace for the last season at Goodison Park.
But I just find this so fascinating because I've already kind of stated what I would like to happen, regardless of whether he signs a new deal or not. I think we should just keep him for the remaining 12 months, and if he goes on a free, then fine. And I know a lot of people will disagree with me, but never as a player been so vital to a team without contributing to so little goals, if that makes sense.
No, it does.
And
I think, and that's why, when he got that goal, goal against Newcastle, but he deserved it because he wasn't playing badly over that period. When Everton was struggling to win and he was struggling to score goals. The reality is that last season, for the whole of Sean Dyche's tenure, Everton have only ever had one tactical plan. Really, they have a plan A, and it only really works if Dominic Calvert-Lewin's up top, occupying centre backs, winning not flick-ons for the likes of Decore to run onto, chasing balls that go into the channel. You need someone of his skill set that can do that, because for so much of, so often there's a big gap between midfield and attack because of the way they play, and they don't do a lot of transition play on the ground. That's Sean Dyche doesn't want to do that because he doesn't want to lose the ball in key areas and have Everton on the back foot, which is a cautious approach, but it's an effective approach. And I think if we remember the days of Frank Lampard, one of the areas where Everton seemed to get hit most was when they lost the ball in transition, and they were almost their own worst enemies when they were trying to push forward themselves. And Sean Dyche has ended that. So no, I completely agree, and I think that there are lots of different things to weigh up, and Everton's PSR position is another one, which, again, as I say, it's a position whereby they could do with sales at some point during the course of this 12 months, and obviously he's one that, unlike, say, a Branthwaite, if they have the whole season of him, and they can't sell him at the beginning of June next year because he'll be out of contract, so there won't be a value for him. I tell you what I think is probably a big influence on where Everton would be in relation to how they judge any interest in Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and that is what happens with Amadou Onana, because I don't think there's much doubt that there's a situation this summer whereby if the right bid came in, Everton would be happy to listen to it, and Amadou Onana would be happy to go. I think everyone sees his value, can see his talent, but I think that we can all see his ambition, and also the fact that he's perhaps not as integral to the Everton starting lineup and Sean Dyche's plans as the price that they can probably command for him would necessarily suggest. But the problem with the issue with Onana is, whilst there are a lot of teams that like him, is there a team that's going to come in and bid proper money for him? Because if someone does, then whilst obviously Everton would lose a chunk of any fee to having to pay off his former club and things like that, it would reduce the pressure on looking for a sale elsewhere, or it would reduce the need to bring in the same amount of money from elsewhere. Someone came in for Amadou Onana now and said they were willing to pay £50-odd million plus add-ons or a few bits. Then all of a sudden, Everton are in a stronger position to set their stall out with Dominic Calvert-Lewin and to command a higher price for him because they've got that money coming in from elsewhere. If Amadou Onana if we get to the end of the summer and Amadou Onana is still an Everton player, well, probably a player which they were banking on selling's gone, and then they maybe need to recoup that money elsewhere, so they might lower their demands for Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and that might bring new parties to the table. So it's a really kind of complicated web. And like I think I said this on Monday, I think Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Amadou Onana are a slightly interesting position in the sense that I think there is interest in both of them from the type of clubs that both players would probably be quite keen to go to, and clubs which can probably afford the amounts that Everton would be willing to listen to for those players. The question is probably, is he at the top of any of those clubs' lists, or same with Onana and Dominic Calvert-Lewin? I get the sense that they're probably second and third options on a lot of clubs' lists. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend the next few weeks with clubs pursuing their first choice, and then maybe Onana might be the backup. Bayern Munich have been interested in Onana, but they finally got a deal over the line for João Paulina from Fulham, so they're really going to be in the market for another expensive centre midfielder from the Premier League. Maybe some clubs might, they might be doing a complete revamp, but obviously it also might just take them out of the picture. So then that's one fewer club that might come in for him. So that's going to be a really interesting one. Just the way in which those, I think that quite often we see in a transfer window how the dominoes fall. One player moves between clubs somewhere,
Yeah.
and then you just see the knock-on effect, and it's fascinating because it might start between two Champions League clubs, but then it just goes all the way through to the bottom of the footballing pyramid as different players go different places, and I think that with Calvert-Lewin and Onana, rather than them being the deal that starts off one of those chains, I think they might end up interest or proper bids, and then may well be the consequence of a move happening somewhere else. Would Arsenal be able to get Bruno Guimaraes from Newcastle? This is something that they'd like to do, but it looks like they'll be unable to do. Well, if so, then would Newcastle then come in for Onana? They like Onana. They could flip side say, oh, we've got enough in midfield, and use the money to try and go back for Calvert-Lewin or whatever. But I think that's where we're at, that kind of chain effect of another deal happening elsewhere, and we know things can move quickly, and we know there's interest. But is anyone coming in for either of those two players with a big offer right now? Well, they haven't so far.
Yeah. Well, obviously the Newcastle one was the closest one, and that was a player swap trade deal, wasn't it? With Mint.
Well, yeah. I mean, they would have been two separate deals. I think that with that, the only way that Mint would ever come on to being able to become an Everton player would be if the Dominic Calvert-Lewin deal would have happened.
Yeah.
So ideologically, they could have swapped. They would have needed the smooth negotiations of Dominic Calvert-Lewin and the money coming in to then be able to, almost, it might have cancelled it out to a certain extent, but from a PSR perspective, it would have been helpful for both clubs.
I just think with Calvert-Lewin, I am a fan. I know his goals to games ratio's not been the greatest, and obviously he's had injury problems. I just think the teams that have been linked with him, let's have a look, Newcastle, probably Arsenal as well, and United, if we just use those three as an example, certainly the two, Arsenal and United, the top six, obviously, as everyone calls them, I would be very surprised if they came in with an offer of in the region of 30-40 million for Calvert-Lewin, because they are not going to change their play for how to suit Dominic Calvert-Lewin or how Dominic Calvert-Lewin would benefit them and their play. That he doesn't score enough goals for them to be offering 30-40 million, in my opinion. They would be better off suited going elsewhere. He's so vital to the way Everton play that he's worth more to us than he is to them.
Yeah, I'm not sure you can quite take his goals into it. Because it's a similar one with Onana. I think if you were to transpose him into a different team that's playing a different type of football or playing the same type of football but better, I think both of them would come up with the end product, a much greater end product. I haven't seen Arsenal linked with him this summer, but I do think that, personally, I think that Arsenal would be mad not to have a little look at Dominic Calvert-Lewin, because I think that they're a club that probably don't need to make many adjustments to their first team, but from a squad perspective, they don't really have a plan B. And they don't really have a striker like Dominic Calvert-Lewin who's got the physical attributes he has, who can challenge defences in that kind of way, that can give you a plan B if you're struggling to get that goal against a team with 15 minutes to go, or if you want a high quality player that can perhaps boost the squad by playing in some of the the cup games and games against lesser Premier League opposition to give like Kai Havertz and that a rest. Then I think there's an opportunity there to buy a player of real quality for a knockdown value because of his situation, certainly for a club like that, and with the money they have, I think it would be an obvious thing for them to do. Man United are just a bit of a strange one, because Man United like Onana as well. Man United coming in for Calvert-Lewin, when apparently they're reportedly on the verge of they're figuring trying to sign 3 centre backs, including Jarrad Branthwaite. They're on the verge of potentially signing Joshua Zirkzee from as a striker from Bologna to help out with the hugely expensive striker that they signed from Atalanta and Rasmus Højlund last summer. For a club that is trying to pitch itself as a new sensible player in the world of elite football, their transfer strategy looks incredibly scrambled to me.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we're talking a lot around the houses here. But I think that Dominic Calvert-Lewin is very important to Everton's side.
Yeah.
I think that we're in a unique situation in relation to the last season at Goodison Park, and also where Everton have been in recent years. Obviously, we know it was only points deductions that ultimately left them in a relegation fight for a big part of last year. But we still also know that it's a threadbare squad that has lost some key players, may go on to lose some more key players, and you don't want to be and the Premier League's likely to be a bit stronger next year, so you don't really want to be taking any risks or gambles there. So, like I would be reluctant to let Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I'm with you in the sense that I think that even if it meant losing him on a free next year, I'd still be relatively. I'd still set my price tag relatively high for him, just because of the value and the danger of losing him for a year. And also, I think that, and maybe this might play into his factor, I think that Iliman and Dye looks like a natural fit for that Decore kind of role behind him. If he's got someone who's a bit more savvy, a bit more astute, a bit more creative behind him, might that give him more opportunities to play football that he prefers to play and create more opportunities for him to get more goals? If they were to hit it off in training, that might just make things a little bit easier. So,
well, you kind of took the words out of one of our commenters' mouth. Really good comment here and a really valid one, which I do agree with, which I'm going to read out. So, the Blues, as said, our reliance on Dominic Calvert-Lewin's hold-up play comes from having no natural wingers or a technical number 10, which you've touched upon within Dye, but the club are almost trying to address this situation right now, aren't they? And if we lose Calvert-Lewin, it would be like, you'd be so frustrated at the same time because of what the club are trying to do.
Yeah, I think what Everton are trying to move towards is having a bigger squad where they've got more options. Like, I think he deserves all the credit in the world for having done what he's done at Everton, but I think it's also fair to say that with Sean Dyche, we know he likes to stick with what he trusts.
Yeah.
So I'm not imagining, huge tactical changes or things like that, even if Everton were to increase the options within the squad. But it's clearly a side that has one main strength in the way it approaches games, and I think there's a clear attempt to try and find a plan B as well, which is very difficult when you've got such little money and such a small squad. But really, what we want to see is a summer where Everton keep Plan A really strong and develop a strong, and develop a Plan B that they can actually pull off to affect games, rather than lose the most important part of Plan A and then simply try to recreate that less effectively because they can't replace Dominic Calvert-Lewin and don't end up with a Plan B either. And that's probably one of the big problems that's occupying Kevin Farwell's thoughts right now.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to Dele Alli, because we've got a couple of questions about Dele Alli, and he has been in, the Everton news this past week. Despite being released, he's still training with the squad. A quick question that just literally popped into my head: will he go to Ireland?
The squad hasn't been. The squad list for Ireland hasn't yet been confirmed.
Okay, no worries. So obviously, what's the situation with Dele Alli then? Because there's a lot of confusion about whether can Everton re-sign him basically on a free transfer without having to, pay Spurs money or stick to the original agreement. And I've got a really interesting question, which I'll put to you after maybe we've got some updates. I mean, as far as I know, we would have to pay the original fee if he was to carry on playing for us. Is that right?
I mean, it's complicated.
It's legal,
but it's not. He's a player that's no longer under contract at Everton, and he's a player that's still coming back from injury. Obviously, Everton, what they've done is they've offered Dele the opportunity to train with them to help continue his rehabilitation. Which he is doing. He did turn up on Monday for what was day one of pre-season at Finch Farm, so he's there working with the players and with the group. He's someone that Sean Dyche likes, both as a player and as a person. I think it's fair to say that one of the things that was one of the probably more fascinating elements, one of the more fascinating pieces of insight that came out of Finch Farm during the course of last season, was this. Was Sean Dyche talking about the footballing intelligence of Dele and how useful that can be sometimes to convey messages to his players. Dele is someone who, in his prime was a fantastic player, and it's easy to forget. He's played in a Champions League final, played in a World Cup semi-final, and was a big part in both of those teams getting to there.
Yeah.
So, there is value in having him in and around. Now, it's not, whilst he's out of contract with Everton, it's not as simple as there's no deal there, so he can just sign for whoever he wants for free. If it was to be Everton, I think that there is an obligation on Everton. I think there's an obligation on Everton to pay something to Spurs. Quite how much, I don't know how much it is.
Okay.
But I think the terms of the original deal make it difficult for Everton to go back for Dele Alli without triggering something that that's prohibitive for them. It's not a free hit if they just offer him a contract and say and that's part of the problem at the moment, is trying to work their way through that.
Am I right in saying the original deal was roughly around £40 million?
Well, I mean, it was so heavily dependent on
appearances,
and different milestones but obviously that was something that was something that came up last year, wasn't it, when it looked like for the first time round, it looked like that he was getting fit from his groin injury probably around November time. And I remember asking Sean Dyche about this, and the clubs were in communication at the time to try and see whether or not they could reach a deal to renegotiate the terms so that when he got back fit, Everton could play him as part, obviously, in the hope that obviously he can get minutes and then might get him back into where he was at the earlier stages of his career. But they couldn't agree that. Obviously, the argument became redundant because he then had a big setback and wasn't able to play football again for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
But the reality is, and this remains the case now, is the terms of the deal that took him from Tottenham to Everton make it very difficult for Everton to contemplate giving him more support, giving him a proper chance of getting, signing a new deal and getting into the Everton first team. It's not a free hit. It's not as straightforward as he's now out of contract. If he was to accept token wages or something, could he end up signing for Everton again? It's not the free hit that we perhaps all would expect it to be. So that's the problem.
Are we talking legal proceedings from Spurs if we were to sign him or play him for 10, 20 games and then fail to pay Spurs? Is that what we're...
Well, we don't honour the contract, then I don't think anyone's going to go down that route.
No, but I'm just thinking if we
there's a contract in place, and if Everton would be mad to breach it. So
Kez has asked, what would happen? This is a bit further down the line because it involves Roma and the Freaking group. What would happen if Roma signed Dele on a free and loaned him back to us?
I think that if that was to be a plot twist, then it would probably make sense for Roma to be looking to do the deal now before there's any formal links between the ownership, because then it would become a lot more complicated.
Roma already coming in useful to us.
So.
Okay. Branthwaite, obviously Manchester United, second bid of, a total of 50 million, wasn't it? I think it was 45 with 5 million added on. And Jarrad was back, obviously, on Tuesday, looking extremely happy, which is obviously good. I think me and Chris discussed that on Tuesday, that, he's not pushing through for a move, he's not kicking up a fuss. And, that is obviously a good thing because it only, it leaves the ball in Everton's court even more.
Yeah.
Was there I just carry on.
A question.
No, I mean, I suppose there's been no other update really, has there? Just
I mean, he was able to come back on Tuesday rather than Monday because he was involved in international football at the start of the thing. He's been away, been in Greece. I think the more latterly of the of his summer break, and look, they came in again 45 plus 5. It doesn't meet Everton's valuation, and I think it's still a bit of a way off. They're probably getting closer, but they still made themselves look very stupid, I think, through this process, because the initial offer was so low that it kind of just raised Everton's hackles and just kicked up a stink when there was no need to. I think it feels like they were trying to play some sort of clever game, and really it's just massively backfired on them. I don't really know what their strategy was, and as I mentioned earlier, this idea that they're there trying to say, all of a sudden we're serious, we're the grown-ups in the room, and really everything that we've seen from Man United so far this summer, from the Ten Hag chaos and considering letting him go before, considering looking for replacements before the FA Cup final to where we are now to trying and potentially being in the market for 3 centre-backs, including Branthwaite, is just one big mess of a situation. Look, Man United probably have the resources to get closer to what Everton would consider acceptable. Are they going to get there? I don't know. Am I expecting a third bid? Yes, I think Man United will come back in for him. How much more would it take? I don't know. I think PR is more of a factor than it was at the very beginning of this, because I think that because of Manchester United's chaotic and ill thought out strategy in relation to this, they've put themselves in a situation where, you know, Everton have had to show that they won't be bullied by them.
Yeah.
And then that probably automatically it makes it even harder for them to get him in the first place, because Everton have to be able to, for any deals come off now, you know, Everton clearly, it needs to be big enough for Everton to be able to say, well, look, it got to a point where we had to just entertain it, and we'd have been stupid not to, and that's problematic for Man United, because they're telling everyone we won't be held to ransom for players anymore. Well, I don't think they're anywhere near being held to ransom with the prices that they've gone so far. But I do feel like we're going to end up with a third bid. Obviously, they're looking at Lenny Yoro, who I don't think, you know, I think he's likely to end up at Real Madrid. They're looking at De Ligt, and I think De Ligt is someone that is probably, of the 3 centre-backs they're going after, is probably the easiest deal for them to do. You're speaking to people over in Manchester, but those people are also saying that it's not one of, you know, it's not De Ligt or Branthwaite, it's De Ligt and potentially Branthwaite if they can get hold of him. I think that if they were to be serious, you know, if they come in and offer a deal, there will be a number at which point Everton will probably have to entertain it a little bit. They're still not there yet. Can they get there? Probably. Will they get there? I don't know. But they've probably got one more bid to either stop playing silly beggars, or just look so incompetent that everyone just calls it a day. I mean, obviously, we would rather he stays an Everton player.
Absolutely.
You know, again, we're going into this last season at Goodison Park. We don't want to leave anything to chance. And ideally we keep him, and like you started at the beginning, like he's a grounded person. He isn't someone that's going to be kicking his toys out the pram. He likes Everton. He appreciates what they've done for him in his career. He was always appreciative last season of the fact that he got opportunities at Everton that he probably wouldn't have got elsewhere. He knows how important game time is to his development, and obviously he starts every game for Everton whilst he's there as well, and that's something he'd have to factor in depending on if he was to go somewhere else. If United were also to sign De Ligt, well, they've got Lautaro Martinez there at the moment as well, so he knows that there's competition for places, and whilst on the one hand that might be healthy, unless Man United was moved to 3 centre-backs, that also means there's a chance that he's starting games on the bench. I think Johnny Evans is out of contract, Varane's out of contract. I think Lindelof, they'd be happy to see if they could get a bid in for him. So they are overhauling that centre-back area of their team. But yeah, it remains interesting. But 45 plus 5, it still isn't enough. I think that, as I say, the interest hasn't subsided. I think they will come back, whether they'll get to a point where Everton say, reluctantly, this is a figure that we have to consider. We'll have to wait and see. But again, that probably also has an impact is also impacted by what happens with the likes of DCL and the likes of Amadou Onana, because, if they get the opportunity to bank big money from somewhere else, then it strengthens their negotiating position when it comes to someone like Branthwaite. So
I just don't think the pull's there from a United perspective. I might be wrong, but this isn't the all-conquering Sir Alex Ferguson team of the 90s and noughties and the trophies that they won. In the past, 15, 20 years ago, when Alex Ferguson was in charge, players would just be putting in transfer requests. There'd be players unsettled. I mean, I just think if this was a different team, if it was City or Real Madrid going for it, I think Branthwaite may be like, well, I am going to put in a transfer request.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think
like
he's he's got good people around him, so I'm not sure that he'd ever kind of push through. I think what we could say is that if City or Real Madrid came along, I think they'd have treated the whole thing. I think they'd have treated Everton with more respect from the start, and we wouldn't have been in the circus that we've got to. I think that you have to remember with someone like Manchester United, there's also a pull, and and we've seen lots of the cautionary tale to Branthwaite, seeing the amount of people that failed to do this over the past 10, 15 years. But there probably is also attraction of being the person that goes there at the point where it turns around, and that you're part of the rebuild of a club that's is obviously historically as big as that. There's also, we probably need to accept as well that Ruud van Nistelrooy has had a significant part in his development into senior football from his time when he managed him at PSV, where really that was his breakthrough year.
Yeah.
And Ruud van Nistelrooy is going to Manchester United to join the coaching staff, so that will have an impact as well. But look, I don't think that Branthwaite's going to be banging down doors to get out of Everton, so it requires Manchester United to treat the negotiations seriously. 45 plus 5 is an improvement, but it's still not there. Had the first bid been 45 plus 5, then it still wouldn't have been anywhere near enough, but it might have at least got things off to a bit more of a respectable start and made it easier for them in that respect. But obviously, we're not interested in that because we don't want him to go.
Yeah, I can understand the first bid being as low as it was, though, just because they were testing Everton's resolve with regards to PSR.
Yeah, but obviously
this one's worse. Because our resolve has been tested, we've stood firm, and it's clear.
Well, I think once you put the first one, you're not going to just massively increase it because then you look stupid.
I guess that.
So that's that. Yeah, I mean they took a chance, didn't they? And ultimately, and I think Everton deserved credit because of the deals they got over the line for Dobbin and Godfrey.
Yeah.
Everton were in a position where they could reject it, or they felt they could reject it. But yeah, they've undermined their wider approach. Once they failed with that bid, I think that's a problem.
Emma says he'd be an idiot to go there now, not just the insulting offers, but the fans have somehow been convinced he's crap. They've been slating him for weeks, which is an actual, really good point. If you're active on Twitter and you go in a Twitter search bar and you search Branthwaite, there's a load of United fans just going, oh, he's not worth this, he's not worth that, he's not that good. Why would you? I'm sure Branthwaite doesn't do what we do and go into Twitter search bars and looks up keywords and stuff like that and his name. But why would you want to go to a club when the fans just have got no faith in your ability and quality?
I'm pretty confident in saying that if he was assigned for them tomorrow, a lot of those same people will be saying, what a sign, I can't believe this. I think part of it's that kind of reaction to, we've seen it so much over the course of this deal. How dare Everton turn down a bid like this for a player that's only played for them for, with consistent Premier League football for 1 year. This whole idea that the world should bow down to, the handful of the biggest clubs and they should be able to do whatever they want. It's just absolutely ridiculous. The entitlement is shameless.
Well, we said we were only going to do half an hour and we're up to 55 minutes. So I want to finish on this one last question, which wasn't on the agenda, but it's from Stuart Boyd, who says, Ian Joe, what are your thoughts on the right-back situation? Appreciate Everton are looking for wingers at the minute, but a consistent and effective right-back will be worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. As I say, I think out wide is a priority area, attacking. And I think that resolving the Dominic Calvert-Lewin situation is the biggest. I think those are the two biggest priorities. Right back is something that I think is up there. Seamus Coleman and Ashley Young both signed new deals, so there are options out there, but they're not long-term options. As much as we all love Seamus, I think we can see that he can still do a job there. We saw last season that he might play a game and then miss two, or things like that. So he's not. It's going to be a massive ask if we're opening that he'll turn up and play 38 games next season. Godfrey's gone. I didn't think he was.
Yeah.
I don't think he was a suitable right back option really. But obviously he played a lot of games there. So I don't think it's wrong to say this is a massive summer for Nathan Patterson.
Well, is it a domino effect with him then? Because like you said, we've just signed new contracts with Coleman and Young. They do play right back. We know Coleman can play. We know Young can play right mid as well,
and left back.
Yeah, but it's so obviously just focusing on the right side. But if Nathan Patterson stays, do we not sign another right back? If he goes, we will be looking for a right back. Is it kind of that?
Well, no, because I think again the problem, and this is what the issue with Nathan Patterson is his injury record is just so problematic. Yeah. He's been at Everton for 2.5 years, and every season he's finished 3 seasons with Everton, and he's finished every one of those 3 seasons on the medic table, like injured, quite often with serious injuries. He's been really unfortunate. There've been times when he's got in and had a little run, particularly the start of the Frank Lampard season, or the season part of the season where we started with Frank Lampard as the manager, where he actually looked really good and started to look at home. It was brilliant in that 0-0 Merseyside derby. And then he got a serious injury, and it's just really, really frustrating. So I think that it's something that Everton have to kind of keep an eye on, regardless of whether he's fit or not. If an opportunity was to come to find a long-term solution to the right-back scenario this summer, I think Everton would be wise to look for it. You hope that the solution is already there in the squad, and because of what we've already spoken about, if he can get fit and his recovery has been decent, and he's at Finch Farm training now with the with the squad, it feels like he'll never have a better opportunity to cement his place as the starting right back in that team, because that team's crying out for one. If he gets fit and doesn't do that at the start of if he isn't the starting right back at the start of the season despite being fit, then I think we can all acknowledge that, whether it be his fitness or whether it be his relationship with Deitch or what Deitch thinks of him as a player, then I think we can all see there's a bit of a problem there, and that he may not be the long-term solution. So,
I mean, I don't want to be too critical of him, because you've made some valid points with regards to his fitness and injury records, and obviously we had the issue Slapgate with Deitch and stuff like that. But for me, he hasn't shown enough to say that he could be Everton's permanent right back. I hope that is wrong, because we've paid a lot of money for him. He would save us a lot of money if if he stays and he becomes Everton's number one right back. I mean, do you see that? Has he done enough for you to say that he's the first choice as the right back there ahead of others?
He probably doesn't start ahead of Seamus for me at the moment. Yeah. I think you only really start him if you think he's got a chance of being that long-term solution. Otherwise, there's not really a huge amount of point in messing around. I think he's slightly unfortunate. He's probably one of a handful of players who was signed at a time when Everton were probably more suited to his style, or wanted to go in a direction that would be more suited to his style, because he's quite an attacking fullback. And we don't really see a place for that in Deitch. He's obviously more cautious in what he does from the fullback position. So I think he was disadvantaged through the managerial change and the tactics that have followed. That has to be taken into account. There's clearly a player there who's clearly very talented. Bayern Munich wanted him on loan last January for a reason, because they thought there was someone there that they could maybe develop. But first, he's got to overcome his fitness issues. Everyone's needs that to happen for him to cement that position at right back. But this is his chance to step up, and really he's got to take it. If he doesn't take it this summer, then it's difficult to see there being a long-term future for him at Everton. Okay,
well, I think we will finish the podcast there. We're going for about 59 minutes, so it's perfect actually, coming up to 60 minutes. We will finish off. I mean, if you missed what we said at the beginning with regards to a couple of plugs and a couple of promos, obviously we are live and you can listen to this podcast on Apple Pods and Spotify. But Joe, you're off to Ireland next week. Everton mini pre-season tour of Ireland. Sligo Rovers friendly. Big week for Seamus Coleman. Big week for you, because you're going to be busy and you're going to be, sending videos, writing articles, on location podcasts. I'm sure you're looking forward to it. So stick with the Liverpool Echo, stick with the Royal Blue YouTube channel for all of that. Looking forward to next week. Obviously, proper football is nearly back. And final plug is that Leon Osman's interview with Chris Beasley and the Goodison Park My Home series is now live on our audio platforms, Spotify and Apple Pods. But you can watch the premiere, the video version of that, on the Royal Blue YouTube channel at 7 p.m. tonight. Really good interview from a player who has accumulated over 400 appearances for the Blues in the top 10 of all time. I didn't know that was the case.
Yeah, fair play.
Chris Beasley came up with that stat. So, yeah, really good stuff. That's all for today's show. Please remember to hit the like and subscribe button and give us a share. Obviously, leave us a review on Spotify and Apple Pods, and follow us on Facebook, which is Everton FC Liverpool Echo. I've been Ian Croll, and Joe, thank you as always for coming on. Really good, insightful stuff. And this has been the Royal Blue Podcast.